People come and spend time here and they move on. The companies have become docking stations for these people for a period of time and then they move on. That's why networking is so important. And I also realized, moving to a country where I knew nobody, how do I make progress? How do I get going in this place? And the answer was to build some networks. And I set up I had an idea to bring some professional Irish people together. There were no associations in Sydney at the time. And 3 of us met one night, and then the next few weeks we got another 5 or 6, and then we had an opening dinner with 30 people at it, and it became, we called it the Lansdowne Club. And the Lansdowne Club now, there's 2,000 members. They had their annual St. Patrick's Day dinner just some weeks ago. Julia Gillard, the Prime Minister of Australia, was there. The Governor of New South Wales, the Leader of the Opposition, Tony Abbott, was there. It's become the definitive great business network and spread throughout Australia, New Zealand, up to Japan, and became a network of professional Irish people who network with each other, have some fun, etc. In 1988, the original organization, the foundation, and the Ireland Funds came together and set up the American Ireland Fund. It's raised over $350 million. It's now in 39 cities in 13 countries around the world. 40,000 people every year go to the Ireland Fund events. Has become a huge contributor. But along the way, it became a huge network. And it introduced lots of people to Ireland. It introduced them to Ireland through the world of philanthropy, which is the world I inhabited. But once people got engaged with Ireland through the portal of philanthropy, they began to get engaged in lots of other ways. Companies, organizations, institutions have strategies for advertising, marketing, PR, communications, but nobody has a strategy for networking. And yet, as Brian just said, it is the glue. It is what makes everything happen. And Ed and I, it's been our experience living in a series of countries. That's what made everything happen.
Here's a context. It's a big sort of map that you've all seen. It sort of takes us from ape to man through Stone Age, agricultural man, industrial man, into sort of the knowledge age, which we're primarily in now. And as we will discuss, kind of moving into the networked age. What's interesting about that is our social development is kind of mirrors the development in our consciousness. So if you go back and look at the Stone Age man, the level of consciousness of the average Stone Age man, it was called archaic. And this is from a researcher called Jean Gebser. The agricultural age is associated with magical and mythical thinking. So that was the period of time where you saw the surgence of all these great world religions. It's more associated with traditional thinking and traditional kind of association. The industrial age coincided with the Enlightenment, with the Age of Reason, the Reformation, the Industrial Revolution. And the knowledge age is now, in more recent times, associated with a more pluralistic understanding of the world. So things have all flattened out. Hierarchies are gone. And suddenly there's a sort of a cultural relativism spreading at the edge of what our best thinking is. But we think there's something else going on. We just want to make this point, that we think we're moving from the knowledge age into the networked age. And we would say that in the knowledge age, you thrived on what you knew. But in the networked age, it's assumed you know stuff. Okay? In the network age, you thrive on who you know, how you're connected, who you are as a person. The game has got tougher. This is the first time in history we all have access to the world's knowledge. I mean, it's just incredible if you think about it. We now know all about what's going on in the world. You know, there's 5 major religious, spiritual traditions. We didn't know that before. If you lived on that side of the hill, you thought the guys on the other side of the hill were just the most incredibly strange, difficult people that you've ever heard of. You didn't know them, you didn't interact with them. Knowledge acquisition is now bottoms up rather than top down. So it used to be like this. It was a hierarchy of knowledge. It was held by people in universities. It was held in libraries. It was held by people who had that knowledge, and they distributed it downwards. Now you know, the new verb to Google, you know, it's changed all that. So our social world is changing. Certainty is an illusion. You know, that uncertainty and change are the natural order of things. When I say that, I always think, how much do we invest in certainty and how much do we allow uncertainty to occur? We're very unable, if you like, or unwilling to live in the discomfort of uncertainty. So we try to make things certain. But that just makes the problem more difficult, because the natural order of things is uncertainty and change. And the other key thing is that what happens out there, as in the world and in the context in which I'm talking about, and I'm trying to make that point to you today, affects us in here in our personal lives, in our business lives, and in our organizational lives.
I'm a fan of Professor Anne-Marie Slaughter, and she worked in the US State Department for the last 3 years. She's a professor at Princeton, and she's gone back to Princeton. She's done her few years in the State Department. And echoing what you said, Ed, she wrote a paper, and she said, the information age is over. As I was saying, we live in the network age. She said the 20th century was a century of countries bouncing off each other like billiard balls, self-contained entities, bouncing off each other in conflict, or in economic or military conflict. And now, she said, we live in the network age. The key is connectivity. The winners were the people who would connect the creative clusters of smart people. And she said the nation state is gone. It's about regions, and particularly about cities. Think in terms of building relationships, because the definition for us of networking is building long-term hearts and minds relationships. In a world where, as Ed was suggesting, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And here we have this conundrum that we all are living our daily lives with, which is these machines, which have thousands of connections. And how do you have relationships with thousands of connections? Well, the answer is you can't and you don't. So we're fans of a guy called Professor Robin Dunbar of Oxford University, and he has a theory called Dunbar's number. And he says that in life, you can only have 150 relationships at any one time. And yet we have these thousands of connections and contacts on Facebook, or as we use LinkedIn, these various connections. How can you live with it? Well, he's proved, he's gone back right through history, back to, you know, primeval chimpanzees and, you know, Stone Age man, and right up through, you know, military organizations and units within multinational companies, to say that 150, give or take, is the number. So here's our challenge. Here's your challenge. To live in a world where you have your Dunbar number, but you also need the power of weak connections. So you have to have those thousands of loose and weak connections, because from those weak connections will come those opportunities, and will come something that we talk a lot about, serendipitous events. And one of the theories that we talk about is this concept of a funnel of serendipity, that random chance can happen in a non-random way if you behave in a certain pattern, if you do certain things, if you live certain places and partake in certain things. And this is our model of what we call social capital. And social capital is a measurement of engagedness, how engaged you are as a person with your colleagues, with your customers, with your family, with your friends, with society in general. And you will find that people who have the most social capital are the most successful people in business and often in life. They are people who do this stuff with integrity, with mutuality, with sustainability. They have a process to do this, but they also are driven by a sense of building relationships rather than just purely relying on transactions.
I mean, Kingsley does this, I think, quite naturally, and has done for years, and that's why I think it's particularly interesting to sort of work with him on this, because I've observed him doing this over a 25-year period. He just does it all the time. He's all the time giving. It's really hard for me to even get a time to talk to him, because he never says no to anybody. He's all the time out giving of his time, giving of his advice, mostly for free. And yet he's got, like I have, you know, a bunch of kids that need to be fed and paid for. But he's all the time giving, because he's giving, because he's giving, because he's giving. Of course, you know, and you know, he's very well received everywhere because everybody knows him. He connects people, and it's a wonderful way to live your life, because you're out there looking to see what you can give to your family, to your community, to your organization, to your alumni, You know, there's so much to be given and so much participation to be had, but you do have to try and shift your mindset up here and let go of some of the personal rewards, financially, perhaps otherwise, that you might think that are needed.
The best skill of us is to be a good listener. And if you want an interesting book in this space, there's a woman, an American woman called Nancy Klein, has written a book called Time to Think. Because we live in a world where people don't listen. And there's nothing rocket science in this. Dale Carnegie in 1935 had this thing nailed. He said, you know, if you want to be interesting, be interested. The Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, use in that proportion. I mean, there's lots of stuff on that those whole listening skills. But I think it really is important that you start building up your networks. And don't be afraid to write a letter. You know, that ancient art. Don't be afraid to send somebody something. Ed and I are always clipping bits of newspapers and sending them off to people, you know. And we're not looking for anything in return, but every so often, you know, somebody makes some reference to that and or sends something back. So it's just always trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes and figure out what would they enjoy, what would they like. Networking, the Irish diaspora, I think, is going to be one of our key pieces of Ireland's economic recovery. And the glue that keeps all of this together is what Ed and I talked about, which is networking.